Hi, everyone. Welcome to the California Coastal Resilience Network webinar series. My name is Ella McDougall, and I am the facilitator for the CRN, as well as the Climate Ready Fellow for the State Coastal Conservancy, which is based out of traditional Ohlone territory in the San Francisco Bay Area. A little background on the California Coastal Resilience Network. We're a group who promotes knowledge exchange through monthly webinars on climate-induced impacts on human communities and coastal habitats. We will provide a link to the network if you'd like to join or watch past webinars. We also post recordings of the webinars, including today's, on our site, whose links can be found in registration and follow-up emails. Today's webinar is called Coastal Access and Equitable Beach Use. We're hosting Mira Manickam-Shirley of Brown Girl Surf and Jennifer Savage from the Surfrider Foundation to discuss issues around equitable beach access, coastal policy and regulation concerns, and issues with beach use permitting for nonprofits. This webinar is the beginning of a long-term effort to understand and address coastal equity concerns. Mira Manickam-Shirley is the executive director and co-founder of Brown Girl Surf. Brown Girl Surf works to build a more diverse, environmentally reverent, and joyful women's surf culture by increasing access to surfing, cultivating community, amplifying the voices of women of color surfers, and taking care of the earth. Mira is a longtime environmental educator and artist in the San Francisco Bay Area, former youth program coordinator at Nature Bridge, and a recipient of an Open Circle Artist Grant and an Audubon Toyota Together Green Fellowship for her innovative work with youth in nature. She holds a degree in environmental studies from Brown University and a Master of Environmental Science from Yale School of Forestry. She is the author of the book Just Enough, available through the University of Washington Press. We also have Jennifer Savage with us today from the Surfrider Foundation. She joined Surfrider after having volunteered with the Humboldt chapter since 2008. As the California policy manager, she keeps a watchful eye on what's going on in Sacramento and along all 1,100 miles of California coastline, supporting Surfrider's 20 California chapters on local and statewide campaigns. With experience as an environmental journalist, radio personality, event organizer, and freelance columnist, Jennifer has a lot of tools in her tool belt to spread the word about threats and solutions to our ocean's health. We will listen to and watch their presentation for about 40 minutes and follow up with a Q&A session. During their talk, if you would like to submit questions, please do so using the chat box or Q&A function. I will review, collect, and read the questions, and Mira and Jennifer will respond. And again, this webinar will be recorded and available for review. And with that, let's get to our presentation.
Hi, everyone. This is Mira Manickam-Shirley. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Brown Girl Surf. Big thanks to the State Coastal Conservancy and the Coastal Resilience Network for having me here today. And this issue about access is something that's near and dear to Brown Girl Surf. It's kind of like the foundational premise for why we exist. So today I'm going to talk a lot about intangible barriers to the California coast. And I also just want to acknowledge that this is something, this presentation is the result of conversations with the organizations listed on this cover slide, and also was developed by our former director of operations, Maya Yamato. So just shout out to all those folks. And Jennifer is helping me with technology today, so I'll be cueing her for my slides. So next slide, please, Jen. So I want to read two scenarios, and I want you to fill in the person who's missing from these images. So on the left, a person is sitting where the whitewash meets the shore on the warm sand with a surfboard. They have a large smile on their face, the sunshine is sparkling off their hair, and they have a look of accomplishment. So I just want you to imagine that scene for a moment, with the left-hand picture as your backdrop. And on the right, for the second image, I want you to imagine that a surfer is dropping into a wave. The water is a beautiful turquoise color. The sun is glistening off the top of the lip. They look determined and skilled as they take off. They drop down, turn at the bottom, and fly down the face. So I want you to picture those images in your head. And next slide, please, Jen. So these are the two scenes I was describing, and I would ask you, how does it compare with the person you imagined in these scenes, and why did you imagine the person that you did? This is 3-time Paralympic gold medalist and adaptive surfer Alana Nichols. She's amazing. I had the pleasure of meeting her a couple years back. And she's breaking barriers all over the place. So I want to talk about 4 specific types of barriers to coastal access. And next slide, please, Jen. And I've broken them down into physical, logistical, financial, and cultural barriers. Next slide, please, Jen. So the physical barriers are really straightforward. For the first 40 years of the California Coastal Act, many people interpreted coastal access as providing direct physical access to the beaches, and groups like Surfrider have actively fought against private landowners blocking access to the coast. Next slide, please, Jen. And more recently, we've started realizing that ensuring maximum coastal access means much more than just removing a gate. Logistical and financial barriers are also preventing many people from being able to access the coast. There are a few reports that came out about this topic. A couple years ago, John Christensen and Philip King put out this one about the how the Coastal Act has been playing out in recent years. And so I'm going to lump the logistical and financial barriers together because they are related and they disproportionately prevent lower income people from being able to access the coast. So next slide, please. So what are some of the logistical and financial barriers? Let's go through them. So first, next slide, please. Distance to the coast. And this is a big deal, actually, and something that I wish there was sort of a more shared understanding of. Most people are being priced out of living by the coast. The cost of coastal real estate is pretty insane. This is actually a Redfin snapshot from a couple years ago, and this is it's just, I think everyone knows that coastal housing it's you're looking at $1 million at the lowest range in the California. And beyond that, if you think about the history of housing discrimination in this country, which is significant, this coastal areas, desirable coastal developments often had housing covenants, which specifically excluded the sale of properties to people of color. And you can actually look at housing covenants and see lists of different ethnicities who houses were not to be sold to. So there's an intersection of both economic barriers to access and then just straight up a history of racial discrimination in housing and desirable housing in our country, which certainly applies to the coast. Public transportation. If you can't live by the ocean, can you at least get to it through public transportation? It's really hard. This is a little map showing, this is actually our director of operations, Maya, made this map. This is where she lives out in Pleasant Hill, and this is how long it would take her. Oops, sorry. This is, I should have asked for next slide a couple slides ago. Sorry, Jen. So Jen, could you give me the next slide, please? Okay, oh, sorry, actually, sorry, I got confused. There's a lag on mine. We're fine, yeah, public transportation, my bad. So, so this is showing just the amount of time it would take to take public transit from Pleasant Hill to the beach. And if you just think about it, like if you're going to take your family there with a cooler, an umbrella, a stroller, if you've got kids, it's pretty much impossible. I've actually taken my surfboard from West Oakland to Ocean Beach a couple of times, and public transit is not designed for it. Next slide, please. So then we can talk about, I mean, I don't have to talk too much about Bay Area traffic. Everybody knows how that works. It's a little relieved right now in COVID time, but think back to before then and how long it could take just to get from the East Bay to the ocean. And parking, as we know, is limited and expensive, and gas is not cheap. Next slide, please. If we think about accommodation, equipment, and lessons, if you're coming from very far, it might be nice to spend a night at the coast, but hotels are quite costly. And even recreation, renting a kayak, going surfing, etc., that's all expensive, especially if you haven't done it before. A surf lesson is easily $100 as a starting price. Next slide, please. Okay, and so the barrier that I want to focus most attention on in this presentation is this concept of a cultural barrier. And this concept was pioneered by Jamila Hubbard, a brown girl surf volunteer who's been with our community for a long time. She is a tall, confident, highly accomplished Black woman. And a few years ago, her friend, who was white, came back from a trip to Hawaii and became obsessed with surfing. So the two of them, Jamila and her friend, would go to the beach together almost every weekend. But Jamila would sit in the car and watch her friend while her friend surfed, and Jamila would drink coffee or read a book. And it never occurred to her that she could also go out and surf. And so Jamila has talked about this and has framed it as sort of an imaginative barrier that has been perpetuated through a lot of the messages that our culture produces. So next slide, I'll talk about that a little. So what are some of these barriers? So just the concept of who is a surfer. Who do you picture when you picture a surfer? Jamila had never seen anybody like her surfing in real life or in the media. And surf media is sort of notorious for featuring white men like the one on the left. And if women are featured, they're generally hypersexualized. And this is creates a super unwelcoming and alienating atmosphere for folks who don't fit into these images. Next slide, please. Women are also compared against artificial and unrealistic societal standards of beauty. For a lot of women, it's hard to be in a bathing suit at the beach. Black women and girls historically in this country have been expected to keep their hair looking straight and conforming to a certain notion of how hair looks that is based on white people's hair. And so a lot of money and time are spent straightening that hair. And that some girls are not even allowed to go in the water because of the investment that often has to be made. Next slide, please. Cultural barriers. Who belongs at the beach? So in John Christensen's report that we referenced, 33% of African Americans living in California visit the coast less than once a year. And many of them don't know how to swim and don't feel like the coast is somewhere they belong. And this is not just just a happenstance. There are historical forces of discrimination that have led to some of these outcomes. And before looking at the next slide, I just want to warn viewers that the image may be triggering. It is a picture of a white man physically assaulting a Black man at a beach during the Jim Crow era. So we'll show the picture briefly and then move to the next slide while I explain the story behind it. So next slide. And then next slide, please. So that picture that I just showed was a picture from a segregated beach during the Jim Crow era. And I think it's important to know that in California, there were segregated beaches. And there are many people who still remember this. It's not ancient history. And when we think about the time in our country when swimming became a thing that middle-class people did during the time when public pools were being constructed, this was also a time of segregation. So there was a lot of exclusion from the places where people learn how to swim and learn a level of comfort with the water and with the coast. So if your parents don't go to the beach or don't know how to swim, it's less likely that you will go to the beach or learn how to swim. And this intergenerational gap on who feels like the coast is a place where they are welcome. The current slide we have up is one of Lunada Bay in the city of Palos Verdes Estates, which is just west of Long Beach. I've never been there, but it has quite a reputation. For more than 40 years, a group of bullying local residents have kept non-locals out. When outsiders try to access the coastline, they're immediately made aware that they're not welcome. Outsiders have been threatened, beaten, gotten their property destroyed, sexually harassed, and have been told that they don't pay enough taxes to be here. The police have been accused of inaction and not taking the problem seriously. So people of color do not make it to this beach. Next slide, please. And this is a picture from a couple years ago. Two women of color were surfing in Venice Beach, and a local surf school owner continually harassed them, told others they were a joke, and then aggressively pulled one of their leashes so she'd fall off her board. This is a really extreme example, but women, especially women of color, get harassed in the water on a regular basis. And let's say just about everyone in our brown girl surf community has some sort of story of harassment at the beach. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, COVID has exacerbated the impacts of localism and the use of exclusionary tactics. When in earlier this year, you could, if you were driving to a beach like say Pacifica on the highway, there were signs that would say if you have driven more than 5 miles, turn around. And this is actually a picture of Bolinas, where there was, I didn't experience it myself, but there was apparently a group of locals who were actually turning people away on the road from the beach. And there's a whole set of signs at the opening of the town that say things, if you're not from here, don't come here. And I included this picture because it's kind of ironic to have those signs right next to Black Lives Matter. When we think about, because they are, the signs are right next to each other. When we think about who has the privilege of living within 5 miles of a beach, who has the privilege of having comfort and of not having a history of harassment at beaches, it's, you know, it's not people of color. And so there's sort of like an irony between these signs that I just want to point out. Next slide, please. So now I want to tell you briefly, because I know we're kind of running out of time, about Brown Girl Surf. So we remove these barriers for girls and women of color. We provide transportation from Oakland to Half Moon Bay, which is 80 miles round trip. We provide all equipment and registration on a sliding scale. No experience is necessary to participate in our programs, and you don't even have to know how to swim, because we provide one-to-one instruction and stay in waist deep or shallower water. Our main surf programs are Surf Sister Saturdays, open to girls, women, and gender nonconforming folks ages 9 to 99, and our youth summer camp for ages 9 to 19. Last year, we were able to offer our 4-day youth summer camp session, including transportation, equipment, and lunch, starting at $15 a week per youth. In addition to removing logistical and financial barriers, this is sort of the big, as I mentioned, this is kind of like the point of Brown Girl Surf. It's not just about removing logistical and financial barriers, but we are removing cultural barriers by redefining surf culture in our own image. One of our most significant achievements is that we are an organization that connects underrepresented people to nature without the dichotomy of those who serve and those who are served. Our participants are over 90% girls and women of color, and our volunteers are also over 90% women of color. Our staff is 100% women of color. The lines between participants, leaders, youth, adults, volunteers, and staff are blurred and fluid. So we have a strong and steady pipeline of participants to youth leaders and volunteers who then instruct and mentor new participants. So our youths, and next slide, please. Oh, I think sorry, I skipped this slide. Next slide, please. I kind of got ahead of myself. Yeah, so there's Brown Girl Surf. And I guess that slide that I skipped, sorry, is to point out the fact that these barriers that we're talking about, if it's not already clear, all disproportionately exclude low-income communities, especially people of color and especially women of color within that. Next slide, please. So here are some pictures of Brown Girl Surf, redefining surf culture. And next slide, please. And here are pictures of some of our youth who they see themselves in our leadership. We actually have youth who are junior instructors, and we have a very strong retention rate. Some of our youth leaders have been with us since we started our surf programs 5 years ago. And last year we had 166 participants, and most of them came back for a second Brown Girl Surf event. And over time, we've connected over 550 girls and women of color to the ocean to date. Next slide, please. And, you know, Brown Girl Surf's name comes from the fact that surfing originated as a brown sport, as an indigenous sport. So by removing barriers to coastal access, we are actually just helping our community reclaim their space and realize that the ocean is a place where we too belong. And next slide, please. And I would like to end this presentation with a picture of Jamila, our volunteer who articulated the concept of cultural barriers and imaginative barriers to coastal access. And after a year of sipping coffee in the car while her friend went surfing, she finally got in the water with a surfboard for the first time at 37 years old. That was about 5 years ago, and now she solidly identifies herself as a surfer and is the role model that she never had, and the change that she wants to see in the world. So we'll end with that image, and I will turn it over to Jen. And thank you, Jen, for doing my slides.
Happy to help, Mira. Yes, I could just admire this photo of Jamila all day. She's so good. But I will move on. So I'm Jennifer Savage. I'm the California Policy Manager for Surfrider Foundation, and I wanted to put this discussion in the context of our mission. So Surfrider Foundation is dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of the world's ocean, waves, and beaches for all people through a powerful grassroots activist network. And we take the enjoyment part of our mission very seriously, both internally and very, very much externally as well. So our statement on beach access is that beach access is a universal right necessary for the public's enjoyment of the beach. And Surfrider Foundation promotes the right of the public, including all recreational user groups, to enjoy low-impact beach access, including the enjoyment of coastal aesthetics, which is all a long, wonky way of saying that we believe the beach belongs to the public and everyone should get to experience the joy that it provides. So for Surfrider, fighting for the beach has historically, fighting for beach access has historically taken the form of fighting gates, fences, illegal no trespassing signs. A lot of people have heard about Martin's Beach. That was a really like globally significant case. And these sort of things that are very easily identifiable. Our San Diego chapter recently busted some homeowners in La Jolla for painting a bunch of their curbs in front of their houses red so that people would think they weren't allowed to park there and not be able to come to the beach. And you know, somewhat sneaky, but also very clearly not legal. And you can point to this and say like, this is not allowed, and solve it. And sure enough, the city came out and repainted the curbs pretty quickly. So that was great. But in recent years, there's been a growing awareness of what Mira referred to as intangible barriers. And so we have expanded our efforts to better reflect the fact that ensuring the right to beach access doesn't do a person much good if they can't get to the beach because there's no easy transportation, or they can't stay at the beach because there's nowhere affordable to stay, or they get to the beach and are made to feel unwelcome because of the color of their skin or their gender, or because they don't have much money. And these intangible barriers are less obvious and therefore potentially even harder to overcome than getting historical access back from a billionaire. But we are really committed to doing that. And so to this end, we have been building upon the relationships that we have established between our chapters and nonprofit organizations, doing a lot of listening and learning in hopes of being the best allies possible, and really looking for ways to have a greater impact at the statewide level. So this has taken the form of everything from supporting legislation to improve coastal access equity and to further seek areas where we can improve statewide policies. We also work a lot on sea level rise impacts, and we consider that a really significant access issue because, as Mira pointed out, most people are priced out of living at the coast. It's much hotter inland. People who live at the coast tend to want to put up seawalls and revetments and all this hard armoring, which comes at the expense of the public's beach. And so it's the inland communities that are really losing the sand and the opportunity to go to the beach during the summer when it's so hot, and these different places, in these different places. The concept being that if you have the right to go to the beach, but the beach has disappeared, it doesn't do you a lot of good. And so, like I said, really expanding our approach to beach access to incorporate these larger issues. And one example of this is a recent decision by the city of Pacifica in the face of great public pressure, which was led by Brown Girl Surf and San Francisco-based City Surf Project, to incorporate nonprofit organizations into what has long been essentially the exclusive playground of commercial surf clubs. So I'll defer to Mira to talk more about that if you would like, Mira. In fact, this is probably a good opportunity for me to wrap up and transition into a discussion and questions if folks have them.
Sure. And I can, I guess I should just spend a couple minutes talking about Pacifica. Is that a good flow for us now?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that would be a great way to segue into the next thing.
Sure. Yeah, so as Jen mentioned, the city of Pacifica, so there's a state beach located in the city of Pacifica, Pacifica State Beach, and it is the closest beginner surfing beach to the East Bay, to San Francisco, and it's very popular. It's extremely popular. And until very, well, the rule officially hasn't changed, but since the early 2000s, basically for commercial surf schools have had permits to operate, but there's no way for there hasn't been a clear mechanism for other groups to apply for permits. So when we started our programming in 2014, 2015, we showed up on the beach, did a program, were told that we couldn't be there without a permit, and then inquired about how to get a permit, and then we're told, well, there are no permits available. These 4 schools have permits, and unless one of them decides to not have their permit anymore, there are no permits available. So various nonprofits have called over the years with a similar effect. Apparently, I guess some folks have been put on a list, but I don't think anyone's ever gotten off the list. So in June of this year, we launched a campaign to pressure the city of Pacifica to create a system for community access partnership permits based on a set of guidelines that sort of defined nonprofit organizations who were engaging underrepresented groups, groups who had been historically underrepresented in the sport of surfing. And the guidelines also included things such as cultural competency, safety, and subsidized participation for folks with low incomes. So we were able to bring that to the Pacifica Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission, and they have agreed to create, unanimously agreed to create a community access partnership permit program, and to begin trying out different arrangements starting this fall, and allowing the 2 organizations, Brown Girl Surf and City Surf Project, who pushed this campaign onto the beach. And I mean, there's still a lot of work to do, and I think that is going to be really where the rubber hits the road of like how do you share space on a beach, on a very crowded beach. But we are currently in that process now of figuring that out, and we are one of many stakeholders who will be working with the Pacifica Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission over the next few months to kind of iron out the details of what this community access partnership permit system looks like. And I'll leave it there, and folks can ask questions.
Great, thank you, Mira and Jennifer. That was a really interesting and thought-provoking and even rather tough presentation that talked about, real issues and barriers to beach access and surf activity. We would like to open up to questions, and currently we don't have any, but if anyone would like to pose a question to Mira or Jennifer, we'll give you all a minute to do so. And in the meantime, I think I would like to pose a question, which is, can you talk a little bit more, Mira, about the, how you were able to work between all of the various stakeholders on getting the public access permit with Pacifica? How did you approach to the public agencies, and what sort of partnerships did you create? I would love to hear a little more about that.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, we haven't, as I said, there's a lot more work ahead, but I can talk a little bit about the process. Basically, we started by bringing it to a city council meeting, and we did that by basically in the wake of George Floyd's murder, there were several solidarity paddle outs that were organized by various surf towns, and which was a great thing, because that traditionally has not been a community that has mobilized tremendously around racial justice issues. So that was really heartening. And there was a paddle out in Pacifica, and I thought that this might be a key moment to share with the public, to share with the people in attendance, the ways in which there was kind of, whether it was not to say that the permit system was intentionally creating racial inequity, but that was the outcome of it. That was the impact of that permit system, and that so it was an opportunity to share with the public that there was significant inequity happening right there at Pacifica Beach, right there in this place that people, felt like the people who were at this paddle out felt a strong sense of connection to. So, and we had a sign up sheet at that event, and were able to get like about 100 signatures, 100 email addresses of people who were really concerned about that topic and wanted to see it changed. And so then we were able to reach out to that group of people, as well as our Brown Girl Surf community, which is a very strong and engaged community, who's also obviously very conscious about issues of equity, because we've all experienced them. So of inequity at the beach. So so we had several speakers from our community, volunteers, participants, and we had then several allies also who participated in both writing emails and speaking during that first council meeting. So we were able to provide overwhelming support for the idea. We also then we were able, the city council passed the recommended that the issue be taken on by parks, beaches, and recreation. So we made an effort at that point to to reach out to the Parks, Beaches, Recreation staff, the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission, and also to the existing surf school owners. And we tried, we really recognized the, while the permit system maybe could be argued as very unfair, that they also, had a livelihood thing going on. So we, and we wanted to be really just sensitive to the fact that they've been functioning under this assumption that they have these permits pretty much forever. So, it's kind of a sensitive issue to come in and say, hey, we want to share with you. So we took the approach of just not trying to necessarily change the whole permit system, but to create this community access partnership permit that was specifically focused on equity. But of course, it is going to impact the existing permit holders for sure, because it's either going to mean that they allow more surf school participants on the beach at once, which is a concern for folks who already feel like there's too many and it's crowded, or the other option is that then we'd have to share some of the existing allotments with the existing surf school owners. So there's certainly, no matter how you slice it, there's going to be pain points for some stakeholders. So, but we've been working to engage with those surf school owners as well.
Great, thank you. That was a really fantastic answer. And yeah, it sounds like, you're not trying to take away pieces of the pie, so to speak, metaphorically, but rather add pieces, and in the sense of not take away access from other groups, but add another category for other groups of people accessing the beach. So we have a lot of questions coming in, which is great. And the first one is, what things can community groups and local governments do to invite communities of color to the beach and make them feel more welcome?
I think there's a lot of things across the board. I think having if there's a town with a lot of if you're in a beach town with a lot of localism, I think creating more understanding around like the impacts of that, like what does it mean in, what does it mean to have a sign that says turn around, go home at the beach? Like, how does that impact people of color, right? Or like, I think especially in COVID, you got kind of vigilantes. Like, there was a guy at one beach parking lot I was at who was driving around like in a white pickup truck shouting at people to go home. And so just kind of, I think cities need to be aware of that type of thing and really counter it with messaging that everyone is welcome here. The beach is a place for everyone. And I mean, signage to that effect is helpful. And I know during COVID, one thing, I mean, hopefully we don't have to have those beach closures again, but in terms of how to welcome people on the beach, having volunteers who come from a variety of backgrounds, who like connect. I think that the key thing in this, to answer this question, I think a key, critical, absolutely critical part of the answer to this question is that whoever the land managers or the city managers are, the people who are concerned about this issue, must build relationships with organizations based in communities of color and led by people of color. So that are embedded in the communities who you want to feel welcome. And those relationships must be built, and those relationships must be built in a way that is it's hard work to build those relationships. And those relationships involve, like, they have to be built on the turf of the people of the communities you're trying to welcome. Like, it can't be like, hey, come, like, we're welcoming you, why aren't you here? Because like people might not hear that message. So it involves like showing up at leadership conferences that might be where you may meet a lot of community leaders of color, and talking to them and saying, hey, like, we recognize maybe in the past this the lands we manage, the coasts we manage have not been welcoming enough. How can we create partnerships? And building those relationships with leaders in the community is critical, because that's the only way to reach people in the communities you're trying to reach, is through the channels of leadership and community that already exist in those spaces. So that would be my number one thing. And then I kind of interrupted myself, but once those relationships are built, then when you have a situation like COVID beach closures, and wow, this is super alienating, and now how do we create a sense of welcome on beaches? You could communicate with some of the leaders that you've built relationships with and said, hey, like, how do we make it clear that people are welcome? What are strategies for making sure people stay safe on the beach? And then if those relationships are built, perhaps you can hire staff from some of those organizations to form welcome committees on the beach and to welcome people and say, hey, we're so happy you're here. Here's, like, if you don't have a mask, here's one, make sure to stay 6 feet apart. And so, but those relationships have to be built for that to work.
Right, absolutely. You mentioned, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to switch to another question, but if you want to weigh in, please do.
Sure. Yeah. First, thank you, Mira. And I just wanted to offer just a couple more policy-oriented suggestions, since that's the world that I work in. One of the things that we see often are cities and counties trying to make parking policies, for example, that are more prohibitive, making them more expensive, basically pricing people out of being able to park there. Because if you're coming, if you don't have a lot of money and you're maybe hauling your kids to the beach and the parking is $20, that might be too much. That might be too much for you, on top of gas and picnic food and whatever. So, making sure that parking fees are kept low, that there's plenty of parking, that there's free parking where possible. you know, in COVID times, it's public transit's kind of in a weird place, but, you know, looking at having low cost or free public transit options to the beaches, because then you're really making sure that people of all income levels can come. And then that, you know, since income inequity is disproportionately affecting Black and Brown people, that helps to address the larger picture. And then similarly, one of the things that we have a big struggle over in this state, and probably many others too, is lower cost or low cost overnight accommodations at the beach. So even just, you know, as Mira brought up in her presentation, making sure when there's coastal development that if everything you're allowing is very expensive hotels where the rooms are, you know, $500 to $800 a night or more, clearly that's going to create a very exclusive clientele. And so making sure that that places aren't low-income places, or I mean, sorry, lower cost accommodations aren't being torn down and remodeled into you know, into higher priced accommodations. And so I spent a lot of time at the Coastal Commission, so you can probably tell from the topics that came to mind. But, you know, just really looking at the coastal development impacts that different projects have and making sure that equity is part of a discussion. That's all I had.
Perfect. Thank you, Jen. There are two topics that you both raised that we're going to get into, and I'm going to go ahead and go with the affordable housing one first. So this question it talks about the Coastal Act, and it says the original Coastal Act included a requirement for affordable housing with new development. The Coastal Commission's 1981 guidelines recognized that this was a necessary part of a meaningful public access policy if the coastal zone was not to become an exclusive enclave of the wealthy, which is exactly what you were talking about. The Commission required thousands of affordable units before the legislature removed the requirement from the Coastal Act of 1981. Do your organization support putting an affordable housing requirement back in the Coastal Act? And if so, what do you think the prospects are for such a change?
Well, I can answer first if that's helpful. I mean, Surfrider does not have an official stance on affordable housing at this point in time, but certainly if there were legislation or another kind of groundswell of effort to put affordable housing back in the purview of the Coastal Commission, I think we would absolutely support that, just for all the reasons that we've articulated here. The same way that we advocate for lower cost overnight accommodations, we would also advocate that there should be you know, affordable housing at the coast, because that allows a more diverse segment of the population to live there. I mean, personally, I would love to see that. I know how powerful the developer lobby is. It would be an amazing victory for the state and for social justice, absolutely. But frankly, yeah, that'd be really hard to get through, but that doesn't mean people shouldn't go for it.
Right, yeah, I think that's a really important position to take on that. Mira, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that more affordable housing at the coast is critical, and if the Coastal Commission were empowered to make decisions about that and create the conditions for more affordable housing at the coast, I mean, that would be amazing. You know, that's what we want to see. Brown Girl Surf doesn't have an official stance on that, but I think our community and our vision of justice definitely supports that type of action.
Yeah, it certainly sounds pretty aligned. Thank you. So I'm going to switch to a question about COVID. Then the question reads, the upcoming holiday weekend has local jurisdictions either considering or already enacting beach parking lot closures along with restrictions on beach use. In Southern California, the upcoming holiday weekend is also forecast to be subject to a heat wave. Does Surfrider or Brown Girl Surf have a position on these COVID-related beach access closures?
Do you want to go first, Mira?
Sure. I mean, I think we get it. It's really, really hard. And I think that I think we have to continue to be more creative about how we address these COVID and beaches and parks in general. I think I think creating staggered parking, creating vouchers for, you can come for 2 hours, just having some special arrangements for these types of scenarios. And we've been talking about it like since March. People have been talking about it, and it doesn't seem, I am not privy, but it doesn't seem like it seems like we should have some creative solutions for how to handle these crowded weekends, right? So short of just a total parking lot closure, like staggered parking, putting cones in between parking spaces, having deploying more staff to be able to monitor some of these shifts, employing, like, the concept of having welcome committees. That's been a really successful concept, right? So and we've also, I think, like, certain beaches are very small, and certain beaches are actually quite large, and there is space for a lot of people to spread out. And I think some of the pictures you see, like the aerial photographs, are like, sometimes you're like, oh God, but like if you actually go on the beach, like I've been on beaches that from an aerial photograph look crowded, but when you're on the beach, for the most part, people are separated. Like Ocean Beach in San Francisco is an amazing example. Like, that beach can fit so many people. So I think just like, I don't think that just straight up closures should be what we're going to at this point, because we know this is going to be with us for a long time. So I think it's imperative that that all of our public agencies continue to think about the long game. Like, how do we deal with this the long game? Not just this Labor Day weekend, but next year, Memorial Day. I mean, it's depressing, like, but we have to be thinking about long-term equitable solutions.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mira. And for probably, I don't know who might know this. I will just say it. With COVID creating so much tension around protecting public health and having this impact on equitable access, and the great, like, sort of mental health benefits that outdoor public spaces, including beaches, provide to people, and in striving to sort of muddle through all of this in a time where information, especially early on, about COVID, well, there just wasn't a lot of it. There were, disagreements among experts, and it was hard to know what was right. And so we sort of found ourselves right in the thick of that as a coastal access organization. In California alone, we have 20 chapters up and down the coast. So it was something that we got sort of thrown right into at the beginning. And what we did in May was we put together an expert task force to address, like, how to allow access to the beach safely. And they released a report with recommendations that both recognizes local context. As Mira was saying, different beaches have different amounts of space, the status of the pandemic in their region, and that sort of thing. But the real takeaway is that alternatives that effectively protect public health should be explored before complete beach closures or other access restrictions. So ideally, the first thing you do isn't shut down a beach or shut down a parking lot, making it effectively for locals only. And if there are restrictions, that they should be clearly temporary and clearly justified by official public health data. And we have seen, unfortunately, because of the various beach and parking lot closures up and down the state, a lot, and not just here, but in Rhode Island, I think Florida as well. Some private beachfront property owners are using it as an opportunity, just as you saw from the signage in Bolinas, to intimidate people into staying away. And so it's just really, it's really important that with these, issues around beach closures due to COVID, that they are temporary, that they are justified, and that the public knows their rights to the beaches, because there's definitely an attempt to take advantage of the pandemic, unfortunately, to limit access to others.
Thank you, Mira and Jen. I think we'll have one more question, and we will talk about beach signage. And maybe this is one that can end on a bit more of like a solutions-oriented and more fun side of this. And the question is about what kind of signage should we really work on getting at the beach? They are typically, most of the signs that we see are things you cannot do at the beach. And so what should the signage look like? Should it just say, everyone is welcome, come and enjoy? What types of signage should we be working to create on beaches?
Yeah, I'm just off the dome. I feel like, welcome, we're so glad you're here. Like, just like let's have that be the starting, like I love this question, and I love the framing. Yeah, there's so many signs that say what not to do, but what can we say? And I think honestly, just starting with like, welcome, we're so glad you're here is awesome, especially in the aftermath of all the COVID closures. Which, I mean, I'm a pretty empowered person. Like, I feel empowered to go to beaches. Like, I think all surfers have all figured out how to get themselves to a beach, but still, I like, since, even when the beaches reopen, like, you feel kind of sheepish. It's like, it's okay. Is it okay for me to be here? And so saying like, welcome, we're so glad you're here is a great starting point. And I think it's fine and good I think it's important to say some of the things that we need to do to stay safe on the beach. Like, please keep 6-foot distance from people not in your households. Like, please wear a mask at all times. Like, that's important stuff. But I think when you start it, when your opener is like, welcome, then all that stuff is a lot easier. In order to keep everyone safe, we request that you blah blah blah. And I think that would be a huge tone shift from what the tone has been over the last few months.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's several beaches that have surf etiquette signs to sort of illustrate to new surfers about how to catch a wave without dropping in on someone and different things. And I like the idea of having like COVID etiquette signs, but I really love the concept of like beautiful, happy signs up and down the California coast that say, welcome, we're so glad you're here.
Right, it's just one simple word can mean so much to some people, and we absolutely want everyone to be welcome on our beaches. Well, fantastic. I am so thankful to Mira and Jen for taking the time to do this presentation with us. You both are extraordinary people, very hardworking and dedicated to this topic of coastal equity, and thank you again for your time. So we're going to end here, and for those of you who are listening, still slides and recording will be available as soon as possible. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Ella, and we'll work on getting you any additional resources or contacts that you may want to pursue. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Stay healthy. And remember that everyone is welcome at the coast. Okay, thank you all so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Thanks, everyone.